Hi everyone, I'm Tammy with the Siberian Wind, and we're back to do another Nocturnal Soul Quilt Along week. This is week 3, and we are going to be doing 2 blocks tonight. One is Moonbound Meows, and the other is Spellbound. So if you haven't seen these blocks before, the Moonbound Meows is a ghostly kitten, and the Spellbound is a spell book, and they are both absolutely gorgeous. So let's get into it. So for Moonbeam Meows, there's a lot of pieces to this block. So what I've done, and I know it's kind of hard to see because a lot of my pieces just blend into my table here, is I've laid out pieces A and B, C and D, E, F and G, and that is going to complete some of the eye unit, or that's going to complete the eye unit. So we're going to go ahead and sew that, and then we'll go on to the next unit. So I accidentally forgot to film this, so I do apologize. So you will have an H and an I unit, and a J and a K unit. And what you will do is you will take your rectangle piece with your appropriate square, and then you will sew a diagonal seam. And I did press mine open, so you see I've got a little bit of a seam allowance on both sides. And then I am going to press this last piece open, and this is going to complete my boop unit. I apologize I didn't video this like I thought I did. Now, with that being said, if you are using a dark color thread and you are seeing it on the top of your light colored thread or light colored fabric, and that's going to bother you, this is the time to change your thread color to make sure that you're not going to see it come through. It's not going to bother me at all that my black thread might show a little bit. I will fix that with quilting if I need to, but I don't foresee it being a problem for me. But if it does bother you, or you see that you'll have a problem with that, then now is the time to go ahead and take those stitches out, put the correct thread color in so you'll be happy with your results, and restitch that seam. So we've got our boop unit. I'm going to press that real quick, and let's go on to the next unit. Okay, so now we are working on the ears. This is called the ears unit. And you're going to grab L and N, and you're going to grab M and O. And there's instructions in the pattern on how to cut these. These were originally rectangles, so I have already followed those directions to cut them. And then once you're done cutting them, you're going to take and you are going to form what they are calling an HRT, which is a half right triangle. So you're going to leave the points lined up together. So your points here will match and your points here will match. And then you're going to do the same with this unit as well. So you will have points hanging out here and here, and points hanging out here and here. If you do not have that, you have not lined this up correctly, or you didn't cut something right. The other pieces that we cut away from these are discard pieces. So double check to make sure you haven't discarded those yet, and see if you can salvage them to make that work. So with these, I'm going to go ahead and sew them. Then we're going to press, and I will have to turn the camera off to trim because I can't show you measurements, but I will trim them up, and then we'll continue on with the process. So the first one I'm going to put through is L and M. And again, if you are worried about your dark colored thread showing through on your light colored fabric, just change out your thread color and that will solve that. Now, when you are sewing these half rectangle triangles, or HRTs, then you do want to be careful and not to stretch your fabric. You have a bias edge right here. This is all cut on an angle, and your fabric straight edges are here and here, as well as here and here. So this edge that you're sewing up against is a very biased, very stretchy edge. So you want to make sure not to stretch that as you are sewing. All right, so I've got them sewn, and I'm just going to clip them apart real quick, and we'll go ahead and press them so you can see what they're looking like before I trim them. And then we will go to the next step. So when I told you that this is a bias edge, you also want to make sure that you do not stretch it when you are pressing. So I am finger pressing first. And when I put the iron on it, I'm just going to set the iron in place. I'm not going to move the iron around. I do not want to iron these pieces. I want to press them. And if you move the iron around, you are ironing, not pressing. So you do want to press these because you do not want them to stretch or skew at any point, because you will need those straight edges here in just a minute when you trim. So when you look at your pages, on page 6 of the pattern, you will have figure 13 and 16 showing you exactly how these units need to be trimmed, because these are creating your meow's ears. So let me go ahead and trim these, and I will be right back. Okay, so I've gotten the ears trimmed following the instructions, and then we're going to grab piece P, letter P, and we're going to sew that in between. So that's what I'm about to do. And I'm going to press my seams open. That's what I've been doing all throughout this quilt so far. I want everything to lay as flat as possible. The curved seams, that I will press to one side, but everything else I press open. And again, if you are worried about your thread showing, I don't think I can stress it enough. If you're worried about your thread showing on your light colored fabric for this block, this would be the block to change your thread color for. A lot of the other blocks you might not need to change your thread color, but this block, with having such a light colored material there, if you were using a light colored material like I am, which mine is a white on white, then you might want to change your thread color. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch that other side. Then we're going to press open, and then we're going to assemble the entire face unit. So this was the last piece to be able to get to that assembly of the face unit. So I'm just going to finger press real quick before I take it over to the iron and press, give it a good press. And if you are a starcher, which I am, this would be a time to starch as well. I'm not starching these because they are pretty well starched already. But if you needed to add some extra, this would be the time that you could definitely do that. All right, so we're going to do that, and then we're going to grab piece AX, and it's going to go right there in between. So we're going to sew all 4 rows together, and that will create our face unit. So I'm going to sew this one together, and then I'm going to grab the other one and go ahead and sew those together in pairs, and then I'll sew the last seam, and then we'll be able to press and go on to the next step. Again, I'm going to be using black thread on all of this white fabric, so it makes me cringe a little bit. I think that's why I keep bringing it up. It makes me cringe a little bit because I am very much aware that it could show later. But again, I'm doing this because I want to do this way. I want to use the same color thread throughout the entire project. I don't really want to change my thread, even though I could. And yeah, this is what I want to do. and I think it will be just fine, and I can work it out in quilting should I feel the need to. All right. So if you do a piece like I do, this is one of those times you want to make sure you open everything up to look and make sure that you're going the right direction so you don't have to rip seams open. Some of these pieces are kind of tiny, and the less you have to rip when you're working with tinier pieces of fabric, the easier your life is. So double checking is how you cope with working with small pieces. Or that's how I cope with it. I don't know how you might cope already with it, but that's how I cope with it. So it's what I recommend. All right. So we now have our face unit assembled. And it's really tiny up here on this camera. But I will give this a good press and we'll be back and start in on the next step. Okay, so now that we're done with the face unit, we're going to be working on the moon. So you're going to have template Q, R, and S. And my templates are in here, I promise. The directions give you a couple of options. They say that you can sew this curved seam right here between R and Q. I did try that and it did not turn out very pretty. So I am going to go ahead and do it the way that they were suggesting, where you can do applique. It's not my preferred method, but with as tight of a curve as this is, and with the sizes being very mismatched for sewing it that way, we are going to do applique. So what you're going to do, so I've got my Q piece right here, and the directions give you how you're going to cut your template, but you're going to go ahead and cut your pieces for R and S just like you would for any other template. So you're going to cut your entire template piece out. You'll do everything that you're supposed to do so Q doesn't get touched. However, R and S, there are instructions for trimming down your template. So I am missing my seam allowance on just the template. You trim just the template. You do not trim your fabric. And so what I did is I pinned my pieces, and I'm going to show you on this because this is white and purple, so it's a little bit easier to see. And so what I did is I've got my piece pinned in place, and these are glass head pins, so they are completely heat safe. They're not going to melt or anything like that. But what I did is I put starch on this entire piece, paper and everything. And what I did is I did a little bit of steam and just dry it up a little bit, or you can just let it sit if you have that kind of time. And then I went back and I started folding my pieces over so that when I have the piece completely folded on the edge that you're supposed to trim, then when I take the template out, I am done with the template. I don't need it anymore, but I will have a perfectly pressed seam. I apologize, it's kind of dark, but I want you guys to be able to see the stitching too. But I do have, this one you might be able to see a little bit better. I've got a seam allowance underneath here that is folded under already, so I don't have to do anything special. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line this up, and I'm lining my folded edge where there's a mark this line on your template. I'm going to line that up with the edge of my piece Q so that I have just a little bit of extra give room, so I don't push too far into the piece or push outside of the piece, or you understand. I want it to be as close to size as possible. So I'm going to pin both ends before I do anything else. And you can adjust your pins to be however you want them to be in your piece. This is just what works for me. And I'm going to put a third one in here at the center during the deepest part of this curve. Now you can sew with a zigzag or a decorative stitch of your choice. I am just going to sew a straight stitch down because I really will probably accentuate the moon and other pieces when I quilt it. And I don't think they're going to need the extra decorative stitch for my quilt. Now that is a choice for me for my quilt. Make your choice for your quilt. I did change my thread color on my top to white for this part. Now my bottom is still my black, and I did decrease my stitch length. So I am stitching under a 2, so probably about a 1.8 or 1.7, because I want a very tiny stitch, because I do really want this to hold, and I don't want it coming up. But again, I don't want that zigzag. I could do that, but I just don't have a desire to. Now, if you find that your piece is gathering or it's creating puckers while you're doing this, you could take and put a little bit of something underneath. You can put a sheet of paper, and that will work like a stabilizer. You can also put interfacing or embroidery stabilizer underneath. But a piece of paper would work just fine. It will help prevent the machine from grabbing your fabric and taking it underneath with it. So I'm just going to stitch this down real quick. And again, if you have a needle down function on your machine, now's the time to use it. And if you don't, just if you are going to go turn your piece, then now would be, the time to put your needle down before you turn your piece. Now I did leave black in the bobbin, so it does give it a little bit of a spooky air, even though the top is actually white. So you're going to be able to see my stitches. No, they're not 100% perfect, but they're going to blend in well enough, and this is going to be small enough in the overall quilt. So what you're going to see on the back is you're going to see your entire template Q piece. And if you pull that away just a little bit, you will see your seam allowance tucked nicely in here from where you've already folded that over and pressed it. Now I am going to swap back to my black thread for the top. And you never want to pull your thread back through your machine. So from up here, when you are pulling your thread, you don't want to pull that all the way through your machine. So trim your thread at the top, and then you're going to go down to your needle and pull out the rest of your thread there. You want to do that because if you pull from the top, you are going to accidentally leave lint and other things in your tension discs for your machine, and that could lead to future problems. Do I accidentally do it sometimes? I do, but I'm pretty proficient in taking this machine apart, so if I had to take it apart, I could. However, I don't recommend it. It's not fun. It's not a good idea, and this saves you a lot of hassle if you will just go ahead and do everything else like the way you should. So I've threaded my machine with my presser foot up, and I'm going to lower my presser foot before I thread the needle. If you are having problems with tension on your machine, thread your machine with your presser foot up. It will say it in your book, but a lot of people don't think about that, and it's not always taught in class because if you've been sewing for a while, you kind of forget stuff like that. It's just not something we like to think about. But that will help save you some tension hassles. All right, so we've got our moon piece R attached to Q. And then the next piece we're going to be attaching is piece S. And this is where you're going to be able to decide how big your moon sliver is going to become. And I think I kind of like it like that. Now they do give you a finished size of how big your moon piece is going to be. So I'm going to take this while I'm holding it and take it to my ruler, and I'm going to make sure that it's going to come out large enough, and it isn't. So I am going to adjust this so that my moon piece will be large enough for the final piece. And if you find that you have any problems with that, you can always come back and take these stitches back out, readjust, and then play with it from there. Okay? And, you know, worst case scenario, if you have enough extra fabric, just add a little sliver, and then you'll have plenty. I know that that's not in the instructions, but that's a workaround from someone who's done quite a few different projects like this. All right, so we're going to do the same thing. We are going to stitch this down. Now I could pin this, and I probably should, but am I going to? No, we're going to go ahead and sew without pinning. And I am just going to be making sure that I am staying close to the edge. And I'm also going to engage my needle down because I turned it off. So we're just going to stitch around this. And as you get more comfortable with doing something like this, this will make probably the paws that we're going to get to, as well as the bottom of the cat, a little bit easier. Those are the paws are going to be really, really tight, but they are supposed to be applique, and they're supposed to be a little raised. I'm not going to have mine raised, and I'm not going to add the little pieces to make them into actual paws until I am on the long arm. So that will be an added touch that I add at the long arm that I'm not probably going to add in advance. If you are doing your own long arming, if you're doing your own quilting on this project, you can always add your details then. But if you're not, you want to do that before your long armer gets a hold of your project. All right. So here is my moon for this project, for this part of the project. And now we're going to take our piece T and attach that. And then we are going to take, oh, let me get it up to where you guys can see it. There we go. And then once that's attached and pressed, then I'm going to take U and V and sew those to complete the moon unit. I'm actually going to press this real quick so that I have just a little bit prettier look to it. There we go. All right, and I'm going to make sure I've got right sides together and that my moon unit is facing the correct direction. And again, I'm still stitching with my black thread, which I absolutely love for this project as a whole. All right, and now that I have that one done, I'm going to remember now to finally reset my stitch length. So if you do decrease your stitch length for the applique, and just make sure that you remember to set it back. All right, now normally I press my seams open. This time I am going to press down towards the piece T. I want that to just hold in place pretty well for me. And because my top piece is a little shy, I did overshoot a little bit. I'm going to line up my piece T with my piece U. And I'm going to absorb a little bit of that seam allowance that I lost. But that's my fault. You absolutely should take your time and sew this slowly so that you can make sure you are getting your seam allowances in. That will encourage you in the future because you will have done it properly the first time. All right, so I have piece U on there, and I'm going to add piece V. And then after this, we will be able to attach it to the face unit. And so because I do have a seam here, I am going to keep this piece on top. So I'm lining up my pieces. And if you want to pin, absolutely feel free to pin. I am not typically a pinner, so anytime you see me pull out the pins, you know it is a more challenging sew than just the normal that I'm used to. Or it's something different that I'm not accustomed to doing all the time. But sewing with your seam up allows you to check out and make sure that your seam is going the way you want it to go and that you're catching everything in it. All right, so this is our moon unit, so let me give it a quick press. And for this, I am going to press over towards the U and the V units. I'm not going to, I apologize, I didn't mean to hit the camera. I'm not going to worry about pressing those open. All right, so we have our moon unit press, and so now we can attach it to our face unit. So we're going to flip this over. We have more seams on the face than we do on the V unit right next to it. So I'm going to put my seams up so that I can see them. And all of these seams are pressed open to make the face unit lay a little bit more flat. So I am going to make sure that as I go through this seam that I am, one, using an accurate 1/4 of an inch, and two, that I am keeping those seams open. All right, I'm going to trim off all of my extra little threads that I've got floating around here. All right, so now we have our face and our moon. So I'm going to give this a quick press, and then we will be right back with the next section of Moonbeam Meows. Okay, so we finished the face unit, I thought, with the moon added to it, but I forgot we have a few more things to do. So we're going to add the side piece here to the unit, and then we're going to add the top. So those are the next two things we're going to sew. And I'm just going to line them up. And this time I am going to go ahead and leave my seams down. If you wanted to flip it back over so you can see your seams and make sure that they're not going to move, you can do that. I'm pretty confident that these seams are not going to move, but of course, as soon as I say that, one of them shifts a little bit. So I'm just adjusting that underneath and readjusting the top. And I am going to press my seams open real quick. We're going to just finger press, and then I'll use the iron. And then we will have the entire peak unit done. I believe that's what it's called. We're going to go with peak. I believe that's what it's called. And I will trim off these extra threads here in just a minute too. I'm not super worried about them. They're not going to get into the way too much, but we are going to trim them. All right, so now we have the long unit here at the top that's going to go. And I'm going to line this up, and because this is a much longer piece, if you feel the need to pin this, go right ahead. It will not hurt me or my feelings or anyone else's feelings because you are sewing such a long seam. And this time I am going to again put my seams on top so I can see them, and then we are going to sew. I was holding on to my threads, that's why they weren't moving. They weren't going anywhere. All right, and I'm going to line all of this up now that it's close enough to being on my table all the way. And this is the entire width of your block. So this should measure to match your sashing pieces. And this will finish at a 12-inch finished block, which is super nice. That's a common size in quilting. If you are new to quilting, you will see that quite frequently. And I will press this here in just a minute. I'm not worried about it right this second, but we're going to finger press it. And I'm not going to worry about pressing open. I don't think it will matter when it comes down to this one. But I am putting a little bit of steam to it. If you did not starch or steam your fabrics beforehand, don't do it now because you will stretch them. So we've got that, and I will starch the entire block once it's put together. All right, so now we're going to assemble the paws. So you have two templates that are going to make one unit. Your ZZ template and your AA template, and I believe they both have different names on them. I'm double checking. Nope, you had 2 Z templates and 2 AA templates. And so you're going to pair those together with each other. And we are just going to sew following the curve, and then we're going to turn it right side out. So because it is a curve, I'm putting my needle down function back on. And when you get these, when you sew these, just take your time. We're not in a huge rush. I know quite a few people have already gotten theirs done, and it's really fun to see them already done, and then you kind of get antsy because you want to get yours done, but there's no need to rush. Taking your time will allow you to do this well and come out with a beautiful curved paw piece. And I'm going to cheat because I've already got one in there. I am going to go ahead and take the second one. And this is how you can chain stitch even when you are sewing curves like this. That way we're not wasting any extra thread, and it reduces the extra movements we have to worry about. And again, I'm just taking 1 or 2 stitches, raising my presser foot, and repositioning my piece under the needle, or under the presser foot with the needle into the fabric. So this is one of those things that if I did not have a machine with a needle down function, that would be when I would really want it, and when I would go test driving machines to find one that does. Now, an older machine obviously isn't going to come capable for that necessarily, but newer machines will. Now, I do not remember, so I'm going to look real quick at my directions. I do not remember if they tell you to trim. Let's see. Nope, it's just turn. Well, hang on. Flip the seam to reduce bulk. Yes, so we do that. All right, so I am just going to take and I'm going to clip around the entirety of my seam. And the fact that I have black thread in there does kind of help with you being able to see just what I'm doing. So you're just going to have little slivers cut off, and this is reducing your bulk. And one other thing that I'm going to do is we are going to cut notches because I know that will help. They didn't say anything about cutting notches, but that's what I'm going to do. So I'm just going to clip in, and I'm going to do that several times over the width of the entire curve. I'm not going to worry about getting close to the seam. I'm not getting super close. You want to make sure you don't cut into your seam, so you don't want to cut your thread. But cutting out just this little bit of fabric can make a huge difference when you turn corners like this. And this is something I did pick up from my garment sewing time. So some of this didn't cut all the way, so just going back and clipping that just a little bit more so that I can fully pull the extra fabric out of the way. Got that one out, that one's gone, and there we go. So I have kind of like a zigzag edge. You can do that with pinking shears as well. So if you have pinking shears, that would be a good use for them. I do have some, but they're not easy for my hands, so I don't worry about that. So I'm just going to clip this real quick as well. And then I'm going to grab something that will help me. I believe, yep, okay. Making sure I know where it is, because I don't use it all the time. I was just speaking to somebody earlier. She was asking what sewing tools that if you have, you can't live without. And this was one of the things I was telling her. So I'm about to show you. And you can find a lot of different versions. Mine's just the one that I've hung on to for so many years. and I have not managed to lose yet. I am kind of on the hunt for another one because my puppy dog got a hold of my handle for it. So what you're looking for is a stiletto. So what a stiletto is going to do for you is it's going to allow you to push those curves out without punching through your fabric. So I'm going to take and I'm going to very gently, because you don't want to pull your stitches out, and I'm going to hold my edges so my stitches don't come out. You can also lower your stitch length if that would help you. So I'm going to very gently turn that right side out, but you can see it's very not paw shaped at the moment. So I'm going to take my stiletto and just use it to kind of caress that seam. Just very gently come up into where that seam is and push that seam out to help curve it to follow my stitching. So now we have a perfectly curved little paw. I will put that over there so I can press it, and we're going to go ahead and do the other one. So again, I'm going to hold my seam edges. Now if you backstitch, you don't have to worry about that. I don't tend to backstitch, but I don't mind holding my seam. So you're just going to hold that and turn that out, and then you can do this with a chopstick too. If you don't have a stiletto, or that's not a tool that you have yet, a chopstick will work if you have one handy. I don't tend to have chopsticks. And this particular stiletto, reason I really like it is that the handle of it is very big and it's easier for my hands to hang on to. So I'm looking for a replacement because the dog chewed it, if you can see. Well, I don't know if you can see or not. There we go. You might be able to see if the camera's going to focus or not. Apparently it's not. But anyway, a stiletto is a wonderful tool for things like this. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and press these. And both paws are basically the same shape. So you don't necessarily have to worry if you got Z or you got AA. They're both basically the same. So, and I did stitch with this with black thread, so you can see, you can't really tell once they're completely stitched. All right, so I'm just going to take one. It doesn't matter which one, as far as I'm concerned. The pattern does tell you, but it's not going to make much of a difference. And I am going to layer it on, and let me make sure I've got the correct piece. I always double check when I have things laid out like this, just to make sure. All right, Y and AB are the pieces that we're needing. And yes, that is the correct size piece. So we're going to lay this on top of here, and I'm just going to center it. And we are going to stitch this down to hold it in place. And then we're going to take the opposite piece, and we're going to do the same thing with the other paw. And these are 3D elements. If you feel like your long armor has told you that is not something that they like, or they're not willing to work with you on 3D elements, you can always stitch them down and then unpick your stitches. Just choose a color that's going to be easy for you to see if you want them to be 3D after the fact. That is entirely up to you. Okay, so I've got two paws. And now we are going to stitch. The next step is going to be stitching a half square triangle, but instead of stitching two sets of half square triangles, we are stitching right down diagonal. This is for the tail unit. So you stitch down the diagonal, and then you are going to trim away the extra on one side. And you can do this with a rotary cutter, but I know about what a 1/4 inch looks like, so I'm just doing it with my shears really quick. Okay, and I'm going to press this open because I have a helper over here at my ironing table. All right. So this is part of our tail unit, and we have two pieces to attach to it. We have a top that's going to go on top of that. Let me make sure. We have to trim, so let me trim this down real quick and I'll be right back. Okay, so I have trimmed my half square triangle, and so we have a top unit and a side unit that are going to go on there. Let me adjust this camera just a hair. There we go. Okay, so we're going to sew this first, and then we'll press open and we will add the bottom, the side piece. This is part of the tail. If you're watching this, if you'll let me know if you're working alongside with me, or if you've already got your Moonbeam Meows and your Spellbound already done, or if you're just watching along to hang out, let me know. All right, so I've got that top piece sewn on, so we're going to attach the side. And I could take this to the machine, but I'm just not willing to right now. All right. So this is the tail part of the unit, and we're going to be attaching the paw unit with another piece attached to it to the top of this. So I'm going to go ahead and sew that on as well. And then when we go to attach it to the bottom, or before we attach it to the bottom, we can press both pieces. That way we don't have random amounts of pressing to do. I'm just doing all of it at once if we can. All right. So let me press these real quick, and then we'll get them sewn. All right, so we have the tail unit and then the paw that's going to go above it. So I'm going to go ahead and flip that over. And if you're worried about catching your paw in here, because that is a possibility, just double check to make sure that you placed your paw where there's 1/4 of an inch at the edge, and make sure you stick to your 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And that will solve that problem. Right. Ooh, have an extra thread. All right. So here's our paw, our 3D paw with our tail. And now I'm going to press this open again, and then we're going to attach it to the belly. And this is the belly unit we're assembling. And I am making sure that my fabric, I know which side is right sides up. All right. So we're going to sew the belly to the paw. Get my thread up underneath my presser foot. So here is our belly unit. And I am going to leave this pressed towards the belly. I'm not going to press it open because we have the extra bulk from the 3D paw. All right, so the next unit that so this is what we've got so far. We've got the head, the peak unit, and we have the belly unit that's going to go right there. So the next piece is the floof unit. So you'll have piece AI, and I believe this one is AJ. And I have already gone ahead and pinned mine. You're going to sew that long curve. And again, we are doing this slow and steady because there's no need to rush. I'm going to take that first pin out, and it is out. And we're just going to sew very slowly and readjust as we go. And I'm also engaging that needle down function. And I know some people do sew over their pins. I have seen what happens to a machine after you do that, and I have refused to ever do it because of that. It is not pretty to have to fix a machine that you've sewn over a pin with. Now, not every time is disastrous. You just might break a needle, and that might be the end of it, but there are times that it's much more tragic and a much harder fix. So I just would rather not worry about running over a needle, or running over a pin, sorry. Not a needle, running over a pin. Alright, and I'm going to take this last one out, but I'm going to make sure I position that fabric real quick. And if you grab your stiletto, you can also use that to smooth things out as you go. So it's really handy for things like that, for curved seams like this. Alright, so now I'm going to take this back over to the iron and I'm going to press it. I'll be right back. Okay, so now we've assembled the curve part of our floof unit. And the next step is we're going to assemble the side piece that will go on top of this. So we're going to have 1, 2, and 3 pieces on top, or on the side of this. So I'm going to assemble these. And I did fussy cut one of these pieces, the one with the puppy dog, you'll see in just a moment, out of that fabric. I fell in love with the puppy dogs, and of course, I know this is a cat ghost, but it's going to have a puppy dog on the blog because I just couldn't resist. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and take that piece off. And then we are going to put this bottom piece on here as well. So I'm going to stitch this seam as well. And these I will press open, just so I have a little bit more control over them. Right. So I'm going to finger press them first, and then I will take them to the iron. And sometimes finger pressing is enough, but I particularly like the feel of my fabric pressed with an iron more than I like to leave it alone. So I would rather press with an iron. Okay, so we have our side unit, and our belly unit is going to go on top of this. So we're going to have our tail and our belly showing on top. So I'm going to take my belly unit and we're going to line it up even with the curved part of the, or the top of the curved part, top of the floof part. And I didn't hold my thread and my machine came unthreaded. So we're going to find our thread, lift our presser foot to pull it back through. If you can't find your thread quickly when you have your machine come unthreaded like that, then go ahead and take the time and start back at the beginning. find your thread back at your spool of thread and follow it all the way through. And make sure you get any loose pieces that might be caught up in your machine, because you don't want to leave that for later. You might find that it's kind of necessary to get that out. All right. So here I have the tail unit and the belly unit attached to each other, or the floof unit, I'm sorry, the floof unit and the belly unit attached to each other. And I'm going to finger press and then press with the iron real quick. All right, and then this unit here, sorry, let me get it back in camera. This unit right here with the 3 just gets attached to this unit. And having those seams pressed open means that it's going to lay a little bit more flat. And I'm going to turn my curved piece unit over because there's a few extra seams on that unit, so I want those on top so I can see what I'm doing. Needle down because I felt my seam underneath shift, and it did. It was trying to close on me, and I wanted that seam pressed open, so it gave me an opportunity to fix that. Yep. My needle back up. There we go. And we're going to press this open, or press this out real quick. So we have our tail with our belly unit and our floof unit on bottom. And I have my little puppy dog in there. I'm super excited about the puppy. Gotta be excited about the puppy. And you can press this whichever direction you like, I believe, but I prefer my seams pressed open when I can. A little bit of steam to it, and I will add some starch later. All right, so that is that entire unit. There's my puppy dog. Isn't he cute? Okay, so I'm going to set that aside because we have to put together the pumpkin unit now. So for the pumpkin unit, you're going to have these 2 pieces, and you're going to sew the seam right here to attach them to each other, and then we'll be able to put the curved part of the pumpkin, which I believe is piece AP. You're going to be able to put that in here. And there is something special about this that is not common to all of the other pieces that we've sewn like this before. So I'm going to take an extra moment to show that to you. And we're going to press this open just because that's the way I want it to be. And I'm going to press it with the iron. All right. So when you have your AP piece, it is going to have a mark this line. That is not dead center. Okay, dead center would be about a little bit further down. Okay, probably fingertip depending on how long your fingernails are. But they told you to mark that line because they want you to line that mark up with your seam. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to line that. I pressed it into my fabric. And so I'm going to take my pins and I'm going to put a pin right in the middle of that seam and where that is supposed to line up. And then I'm going to go ahead and pin all of the rest of this, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've now got it pinned, and I am going to sew it with my pieced section on top the outer section on top because there is that seam in the middle. And I do know my tendency is I will pull a little bit on the fabric and I don't want to pull that seam loose. So I purposefully pinned so that I would be able to sew with the curved piece on, or the concave piece on bottom, the pumpkin piece on bottom, and have the backgrounds on top so that I would not run into that problem. When you have a piece that is going to give you a little bit more room to stretch it, like the pumpkin piece will, that is the piece you typically want to put on bottom because it's going to give you a little bit easier of a sewing time. That's how I learned to sew curves, and that has worked well for me in the past. The moon section of this block was the only exception because that piece was just really tiny and very sharp of a curve. So that was why we decided to go the applique method. Alright, so I'm just going to take my time and sew a couple of stitches and take out a pin. Go. And here we go. We are done sewing that. And this is the last curve for this block. So if you have been struggling with your curves, you can now pat yourself on the back. That is the last of them. And so I'm going to take this to my iron and get this pressed, and we'll be back for the next section. Okay, so we now have this assembled. That is the left-hand side of our pumpkin. So now we need to assemble the rest of the pumpkin. You're going to have your stem, your background pieces, and your pumpkin pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and start assembling. And your paw unit for this side of the ghost, the ghostly kitty, is going to go above this, and it's going to have a little piece added to it as well. So to help me with chain piecing, we're going to put that on there at the same time. There's no need to wait. And it makes my little chain piecing heart happy to do that. So I started with the stem unit because it needs an extra piece on it, and it's not just one seam. So that way I could put it back through the easiest. So we're going to grab that and attach our background piece. Now all three of these are done, and we just need to press. So I'm going to go ahead and press the paw unit first. And again, I finger press whenever I can. So we have that finger pressed. And then we're going to finger press the stem unit. And you can do this in whichever order. The pattern lays out which order, but you can do this in whichever order because it's all going together in the end. Just make sure you've got the right pieces with each section. All right, so I've got all three finger pressed, so we're going to press it at the iron real quick. And we are almost done. All right, so now we have the stem unit and the rest of the pumpkin, so we're going to put these together. Once we get this seam sewn, we'll sew the next one to add the stem unit. And I am going to go ahead and finger press this open and go ahead and press at the iron real quick. Just because it gives me a little bit easier time handling it. And since we're sewing on a pumpkin, if you're watching this video, if you will let me know, do you carve a pumpkin every year for Halloween? Do you do a reusable, carvable pumpkin out of styrofoam, or do you carve a real pumpkin, or do you like pumpkin? Do you eat pumpkin? Do you not like pumpkin? Do you eat pumpkin pie? All the pumpkin things we can discuss. Let me know in the comments what you think. If you eat pumpkin, what's your favorite kind of pumpkin? Not everybody can have pumpkin, and not everybody likes pumpkin. But if you do, how do you like your pumpkin? I make pumpkin pie almost every year. I think I skipped last year, but I may be making a pumpkin pie this year. All right, so we've got our paw unit. We're going to attach it down to our pumpkin unit. And same thing with the other paw unit. Make sure that you've left 1/4 of an inch from your paw to the edge so you have your seam allowance. You want to make sure you have your seam allowance. Alright, and we're also going to be attaching some background to the bottom. So I can press this up and out of the way. And I am going to press this open. There's not too many seams to be able to do that. I'm going to finger press and then press the iron. Alright, and then we have a bottom piece to put on here on the bottom of our pumpkin. So we're going to lay that in, and I'm going to put my seams up so I can see them again. And we're going to lay it flat and sew it down. Okay. And this one I'm going to press to the ground, press to the bottom. There's no need for me to press that open, so it will be fine. Alright, so every piece that we cut for this is now sewn into something. So we're going to attach the other paw unit to the right hand side of our belly unit, belly and floof unit. So we're going to line that up and get that sewn. And if your basting stitch holding your paw in place is a little bit more or less than your 1/4 of an inch, less it won't matter. If it's more than your 1/4 of an inch, and so when you sew it down here, you're going to see it, then you can just take those stitches out with your seam ripper after you assemble the block. Alright, so we have our paws. We have our bottom piece, and this one, the reason I mentioned that is I will have to take out my basting stitches, but that's okay. I have time to do that. This won't be done till closer to Halloween, and it will be a little bit longer than that before I can get to quilting it. Alright, so now we are going to attach our peak unit down to the bottom. And this again, if you are a pinner, feel free, go ahead, pin to your heart's content. if you're like me and you don't normally pin, this would actually be one that you might want to pin if you want things to line up, or if you are concerned about placement. You can pin so that way you know where everything's going to be, and make sure that you again have your 1/4 of an inch so that your paws are 3D if you want them to be 3D. I'm not concerned with mine being 3D, but that's okay. They will still be able to be. I left plenty of room on both top and bottom for my 1/4 of an inch seam. All right. Let me press the seam and I will show you the Moonbeam Meows block. Okay, so we have finished assembling our Moonbeam Meows block, and this is so stinking cute, guys. So stinking cute. So we have our moon unit, we have our peak unit, we have our belly unit, our floof unit, and our pumpkin unit. So isn't that adorable? And these paws are 3D. So if you have not, or if you want to go in and add details to your paws, you can do that. You can also add whiskers to your ghost's face. Whatever you want to do to snazz it up even a little bit more. But it is so cute just as it is. And of course, I got a little puppy dog in there. Got to throw that in there. Okay, so Moonbeam Meows is done. So we're going to work on Spellbound block now. So let's get going. Okay, so now that we have sewn our Moonbeam Meows, it is time to work on Spellbound. So I'm going to assemble everything. I'm going to lay it out on my desk here as I go. And a lot of it is fairly easy sewing compared to what we've just been through with Moonbeam Meows. It's going to be straight lines and snowball corners. So you're going to see a lot of that, and then I will show you what the block looks like before the applique, and I'll show you what I did with the applique, but we're going to speed this up. Okay, so now that we have our spell book completed, we need to put all the extra little touches on here. That's going to include a bookmark, and that's going to also include the little gems that we have. And I'm going to pull, all right, that's the black one. I'm actually going to put the black one over here, and I'm going to put my orange one over here. And there is a diagram in your book about where about these need to go. So you can follow the diagram in the pattern as to where your gems need to go, as they're of course all falling off of this. I'm going to take you back down to the machine and I'm going to show you what I did. So my book is assembled and I have all of these ready to go. So when you got your templates for the bookmark and the different gems, they all had a seam allowance on there, so I cut the seam allowance off. I starched my fabric and made sure to have it pinned in place where I wanted it, and then folded it over and used the iron to help dry the starch in place. So that is going to give me a needle turned look without having to physically do needle turn. So I'm going to have the needle turn effect of all of the fabrics are going to have their edges turned under. So you can see here, I can stick my finger underneath that edge. So they're just pressed and starched really, really well. And that's what's holding them in place. And then I am going to use different color threads to sew them down. So I'm going to sew my black and white ones on first because I already have black thread loaded. Then I will swap to some purple thread and get the 2 purple gems plus my bookmark stitched in place. And then I will swap to a yellowish orange thread and get these stitched in place. So let's do it. So we now have completed our Spellbound book, our Spellbound block. So we have Spellbound and Moonbeam Meows now completed, and we are ready for Monday. If you have any questions about this project or you want to sign up for the Nocturnal Soul Quilt Along, there are links in the description box below this video where you can sign up, get your own emails, get the free project, and join us. There are prizes that are being given out every week for those who are participating in the Stitch Along, so you don't want to miss out on all of the fun. And even if you can't get it completed this week or get caught up, don't worry. Go ahead and start with wherever we are when you get to join, and come hang out, and you will get to go back and do your blocks later. That is perfectly okay. So I hope you've enjoyed this week's video, and my next one will be coming out next Friday, 11:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I'm Tammy for the Siberian Wind, and I'm glad you're here with me hanging out while I work through the Nocturnal Soul quilt along. Thanks. Bye.